just want to start off by saying, if you want an answer at the end, prepare to be disappointed. I was a Nickelodeon intern at Nickelodeon Studios for a year in 2005 for my degree in animation. It wasn't paid, of course, most internships aren't, but it did have some perks beyond education. To adults, it might not seem like a big one, but most kids at the time would go crazy over it. Now, since I worked directly with the editors and animators, I got to view the new episodes days before they aired. I'll get right to it without giving too many unnecessary details. They had very recently made the SpongeBob movie, and the entire staff was somewhat sapped of creativity, so it took them longer to start up the season. But the delay lasted longer for more upsetting reasons. There was a problem with the Series 4 premiere that set everyone and everything back for months. Me and two other interns were in the editing room, along with the lead animators and sound editors for the final cut. We received a copy that was supposed to be Fear the Krabby Patty, and gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that it isn't final yet, animators often put a mock title card, sort of an inside joke for us, with phony, oftentimes blue titles, such as How Sex Doesn't Work instead of Rocket Bye Bye Valve, when SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a sea scallop. Nothing particularly funny, but work-related chuckles. So when we saw the title card Squidward's Suicide, we didn't think it more than a morbid joke. One of the interns did a small throat laugh at it. The happy-go-lucky music starts. Plays as normal, pretty much. The story began with Squidward practicing his clarinet, hitting a few sound notes like normal. We hear SpongeBob laughing outside, and Squidward stops, yelling at him to keep it down as he has a concert basically that night and needs to practice. SpongeBob says okay and goes to see Sandy with Patrick. The bubble splash screen comes up and we see the ending of Squidward's concert. This is when things begin to seem off. While playing, a few frames repeat themselves, but the sound doesn't. At this point, sound is synced up with animation, so yes, that's not common. But when he stops playing, the sound finishes as if the skip never happened. There is slight murmuring in the crowd before they begin to boo him. Not normal cartoon booing that is common in the show, but you can very clearly hear malice in it. Squidward's in full frame and looks visibly afraid. The shot goes to the crowd, with SpongeBob in center frame, and he too is booing, very much unlike him. That isn't the oddest thing, though. What is odd is everyone has these hyper-realistic eyes. Very detailed. Clearly not shots of real people's eyes, but something a bit more real than CGI. The pupils were red. Some of us looked at each other, obviously confused, but since we weren't the writers, we didn't question its appeal to children just yet. The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very forlorn. The view outside of his porthole window is of a night sky, so it isn't very long after the concert. The unsettling part is that at this point there is no sound. Literally no sound. Not even the feedback from the speakers in the room. It's as if the speakers were turned off, though the status showed them working perfectly. He just sat there, blinking, in silence, for about 30 seconds. Then he started to sob softly. He put his hands, or tentacles, over his eyes, and cried quietly for a full minute more, all the while a sound in the background very slowly growing like from nothing to barely audible. It sounded like a slight breeze through the forest. The screen slowly began to zoom in onto his face. By slow I mean it's only noticeable if you look at shots 10 seconds apart side by side. His sobbing gets louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitches a bit, as if it's twists in on itself. For a split second, then moves back to normal. The wind through the trees sound gets slowly louder and more severe, as if a storm is brewing somewhere. The eerie part is a sound, and Squidward's sobbing sounded real, as if the sound wasn't coming from the speakers, but as if the speakers were holes the sound was coming through on the other side. As good a sound as the studio likes to have, they don't purchase equipment to be that good to produce sound of that quality. Below the sound of the wind and sobbing, very faintly, something sounded like laughing. It came at an odd intervals and never lasted more than a second, so you had a hard time pinning it. We watched this show twice, so pardon me if things sound too specific, but I've had time to think about them. After 30 seconds of this, the screen blurred and twitched violently, and something flashed over the screen as if a single frame was replaced. The lead editor, as well, paused and rewound frame by frame. What we saw was horrible. It was a still photo of a dead child. He couldn't have been more than 6. The face was mangled and bloody, one eye dangling over his upturned face popped. He was naked down to his underwear, his stomach crudely cut open, and his entrails laying beside him. He was lying on some pavement that was probably a road. The most upsetting part was that there was a shadow of the photographer. There was no crime tape, no evidence, tags, or markers. The angle was completely off for a shot designed to be evidence. It was seen the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were of course mortified, but pressed on, hoping that it was just a sick joke. The screen flipped back to Squidward, still sobbing louder than before, and half body in frame. There was now what appeared to be blood running down his face from his eyes. The blood was also done in a hyper-realistic sense, looking as if you touched it, you get blood on your fingers. The wind sounded now as if it was that of a gale blowing through the forest. There were even snapping sounds of branches, the laughing, a deep baritone, lasting at longer intervals and coming more frequently. After about 20 seconds, the screen again twisted and showed a single frame photo. The editor was then reluctant to go back. We all were, but he knew he had to. This time, the photo was that of what appeared to be a little girl, no older than the first child pretty much. She was lying on her stomach, her barrettes in a pool of blood next to her. Her left eye was too popped out and popped. Naked except for underpants, her entrails were piled on top of her above another crude cut along her back. Again, the body was on the street and the photographer's shadow was visible. Very similar in size and shape to the first. I had to choke back vomit, and one intern, the only female in the room, ran out. The show resumed. After about 5 seconds, after this second photo played, Squidward went silent. As is all the sound, like it was when the scene started. He put his tentacles down and his eyes were now done in hyper-realism like the others were in the beginning of the episode. They were bleeding, bloodshot, and pulsating. He just stared at the screen. After about 10 seconds, he started sobbing, this time, not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud, and most fear-inducing of all is the sobbing was mixed with screams. Tears and blood were dripping down his face at a heavy rate. The wind sound came back, and so did a deep voice laughing, and this time the same still photo lasted for a good 5 frames. The animator was able to stop it on the 4th and backed up. This time the photo was of a boy, about the same age, but this time the scene was different. The entrails were just being pulled from a stomach wound by a large hand. The right eye popped and dangling, blood trickling down. The animator proceeded. It's hard to believe, but the next one was different, but we couldn't tell what. He went on to the next, same thing. He went back to the first and played them quicker. I lost it. I vomited on the floor. The animating and sound editors gasping at the screen. The 5 frames were not as if they were 5 different photos. They were played out as if they were frames from a video. We saw the hand slowly lift out the guts. We saw the kid's eyes focus on it. We even saw 2 frames of the kids beginning to blink. The lead sound editor told us to stop. He had to call in the creator to see this. Mr. Hohenberg arrived within about 15 minutes. He was confused as to why he was called down there, so the editors just continued the episode. Once the few frames were shown, all screaming, all sound again stopped. Squidward was just staring at the viewer, full frame of the face for about 3 seconds. The shot quickly panned out, and that deep voice said, "Do it!" And we see Squidward's hands a shotgun. He immediately puts his gun to the mouth and pulls the trigger. Realistic blood and gray matter splatter the wall behind him and his bed. And he flies back with the force. The last 5 seconds of this episode shows his body on the bed, on his side, one eye dangling on what's left of his head above the floor, staring blankly at it. Then the episode ends. Mr. Hillenberg is obviously angry at this. He demanded to know what the heck was going on. Most people left the room at this point, so it's just a handful of us to watch it again. Viewing the entire episode twice only served to imprint the entirety of it in my mind and caused me horrible nightmares. I'm sorry I'm stayed. The only theory I can think of was the file was edited by someone in the chain from the drawing studio to here. The CTO was called in to analyze when it happened. The analysis of the file did show it was edited over by new material. However, the timestamp was a mere 24 seconds began, and then it just began 24 seconds after we saw it. I'm sorry, I'm just so lost. All equipment involved was examined for foreign software and hardware as well as glitches, as if the timestamp may have glitched and showed the wrong time. But everyone checked out fine, and everything checked out fine. We don't know what happened. To this day, nobody does. There was an investigation into the nature of the photos, but nothing came out of it. No child scene was identified and no clues were gathered from the data involved, nor physical clues in the photos. I never believed in unexplained phenomena before. Now that I've seen something happen and can't prove anything about it beyond anecdotal evidence, I think twice about things now.